Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. It feels good to be back behind the microphone. We got a whole bunch of hunts over the last couple weeks we've been doing. We've been super busy, so we kind of got ahead on episodes. And this is like the first time we've recorded in maybe 2024.
Yep.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Oh, my gosh. Anyways, and we're doing this on a Sunday night before it drops because, back to the good old days, man, turning and burning episodes. Anyways, Jacob, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Doing all right?
Doing okay.
No. Oh, wow. Okay. Jeez Louise.
Doing okay. Could have been better. Could have been tied up with the giant, but
Oh, yeah, we got some stuff to talk about, man. We got some stuff to talk about. One thing I'm going to bring up, February 24th, we got the second annual Weaver Meat Processing Southern Outdoorsman Meetup.
Hunters Meetup.
MEAT up. Weaver Meat Processing, they're providing all the food for it. It's at their location up there in Hartselle, Alabama. There's going to be a big buck contest, and similar to last year, obviously we're going to be there. I think we're going to have some speakers possibly.
Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of podcast guests there, past podcast guests. It's going to be
last year, Michael Perry showed up with a state record. Another guy showed up with a 181 that he killed.
Yeah,
in public. Like it was a good time.
So, man. So the Hunters Meetup, this is going to be an awesome event, second annual event, free for everybody. So just come out. You don't have to worry about buying tickets or anything like that. It's going to be super fun. Food's going to be provided all day long. If I can talk. There will be drinks there as well. Non-alcoholic drinks, but there'll be drinks there as well. There also will be Buckmasters there. Steve Lucas and a couple of guys from Buckmasters will be scoring deer, both for the Weaver Meat Big Buck Contest, which they're going to have all the winners announced at this event with the official scoring of those deer. But also, if you have a deer you'd like to get scored, you can actually bring it on down to the event, and Steve Lucas and Buckmasters will give you a score for it. So it's going to be a really fun event. It was awesome last year. Had a really good turnout, but we did it during deer season last year. It was in January during last year. So this year, February 24th, after season, again, it's going to be a great time. Come and hang out and come meet us. We'll have a bunch of Southern Outdoorsman merch and just have a really good time. So don't miss it.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other thing, too, we got the old school camo hats back in stock. So those are back on the website now. They've sold out a couple times really quickly. We bought a ton of them this time. So we'll see if they sell out really quickly again. They might. Hopefully they do. We'd appreciate it if they did. But anyway, so those are on the site. You can go check those out. And today, we're doing a little bit different. This is a Monday episode, but we decided that we're going to go ahead and actually tackle a couple more Q&As today because right now we have quite a few in the hopper, and some of these are like pretty timely questions. So meaning it would be better if we could answer them during deer season. And right now we've got questions out to probably May.
Yeah.
So we're going to start cycling through and doing more of these. That being said, keep writing them in. It's awesome. We need you guys to write these in. We really enjoy it. And we're going to start doing a thing where we're going to have guests on who are relevant to the topic. So, we're going to get guests on who we've had on in the past, and they're going to basically start doing Q&A episodes with us. We think that's going to be really fun. A lot of good information is going to come out of it. It's going to be super engaging. So keep writing in those. And, hey, if you even have a specific guest who you have in mind who would be good for a question, you can just say, hey, I would love for so-and-so to answer this question. So do that. And also write in your turkey questions. Go ahead and start writing those in because right now we have exactly 0 turkey questions in the hopper. So I would love to get some turkey questions in.
Absolutely.
Especially right now going into turkey season. So when we're doing interviews, we have those questions on hand.
Yep, absolutely.
So anyways, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do some of those. And also, last thing before we kind of get into it, I got to shout out, man. I was hunting a certain WMA today. I went down there with my dog Boone. Me and Tiffany went down there. We took Piper. Piper's our 9-month-old baby, and it works out good. We got this baby carrier that we can put her in, and she literally just sits on Tiffany's chest, facing outward. She's like kind of hanging there like this, but man, she loves it. We got these big earmuffs, and it's really easy to take her on these hunts with the dog because she's laughing and she can be loud, and it's like a low pressure hunt, and also it's a good scouting tool. So we went down to this certain WMA, and we were going to go hunt quail and woodcock down there. And I got this spot picked out on the map. And I'm like, okay, this is it. Real swampy looking bottom. Got some pines up top that all kind of drop down into this bottom. And for woodcock, what I'm looking for is that I'm looking for like soft dirt with high stem count, like kind of sapling type thickets. So not necessarily like a briar thicket, more like a sapling thicket. And this particular area has that, and the soft dirt comes in with the swampy bottom, so it looks really good for woodcock, but also it looks good for deer because it's super thick. There's like a thermal hub. There's a bunch of ridge points coming down. So we get down there. We go to church this morning. Get out, eat lunch, get ready, head down there. Get there at like 1 o'clock, and we come rolling up on that spot. And there's a truck there, and the guy's still at his truck, and we roll up, and I'm like, "Dadgummit, we got beat here." And we roll through there, and he's like, I think he's getting something out of the bed of his truck, and we're rolling past him, and I wave and everything. And as he's getting something out of the bed of his truck, as we roll by, like he turns towards us, and I see a Southern Outdoorsman hat, and I'm like, I hit the brakes, and Tiffany's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "He's wearing a Southern Outdoorsman hat." And she was like, "No way!" And we back up. And shout out to Tristan, man. Tristan Guffey, ran into him down there, had an awesome conversation with him. Tristan, I want you to know you made my day, man. You really did. That was a fantastic conversation. And I was like, "You hunting that side of the road?" And, I pointed to the side I was not wanting to hunt. He's like, "No, I'm going over there." I was like, dang, but it was a really good looking area for deer. So, I'm glad he got to go hunt that. So hopefully he did good. Tristan, if you're listening to this, I'm curious about how that hunt went, because my cell camera's lit up right at dark today, and on several different properties around the state. But he was going into a really good looking area. So anyways, I just thought I'd give him a shout out. That was a really cool experience getting to talk to him.
Speak about running into listeners. So I had a listener message us, and he was asking, he said, "Hey, are you guys hunting XYZ management area this weekend?" And I messaged him back. I'm like, "No, we're not." He's like, "Well, there's these boys in camp killed a couple bucks," and he's like, "I swear one of them's Jacob. Like, looks just like Jacob." And I'm like, I messaged back. I'm like, "It's funny. Like, I've heard people say that in the past. Seems like a guy that looks like me." And anyways, messaged the guy back, and I'm telling you, not 20 minutes later, another listener and follower of the show and a friend of the show, Steve, he messaged me, like personally messaged me. He's like, "Hey, dude, are y'all in XYZ management area?" And I'm like, "No," but I'm like, "Did you see somebody that looks like me?" And he's like, "Actually, yes." He's like, "These three boys come running down, rolling down this trail he was down, like a gated trail with some bicycles in a game cart." He said the guy with the game cart looked just like you, and he's met me before. So I'm like, this dude must look very similar.
We got to figure out who this guy is.
So, public service announcement: there is a Jacob lookalike out and about on public land in Alabama, so be aware, okay? Don't be walking up to him like, "Hey, Jacob, how you doing?"
Proceed with caution.
Oh yeah, watch his name be Jacob too.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
So if anybody knows a fella, and I guess him and some buddies killed a buck this past weekend, on some public land in Alabama that looks a lot like me. Just tell them that some people have noticed.
People have noticed.
Yeah. So public service announcement. There's a lookalike Jacob out in the woods.
Yeah. We just got back from our SOA hunt, which we've had people talking about. Ran into some listeners on that SOA hunt.
A ton of listeners.
Dude, everyone that came in the Skinner's Shed was like, "Man," and so
everybody.
we have a YouTube video up from this past fall where we doubled up on bucks, and they had all seen that YouTube video, and of course that's the one where I like missed that giant buck, and everyone was like, "Man, I was hurting for you," and I was like, "Oh." It was fun though, man. It was a really good time. We're gonna talk about that one on Thursday.
Yeah.
I think this one, real quick. Let's talk about the end of your river bottom hunt, and then we're gonna get into our Q&As.
Like
with Chris and everybody.
Yeah. So one thing I didn't mention on that hunt, because we did this big hunt camp with Jacob Emery, Chris Leppert, Shane Parker was there, Michael Pike was there, Talon Neal, Greg Mara. Mayhair. Sorry, Greg. Messed your last name up again. And who else? Oh, Seth Johnson. And am I missing anybody?
Miles Peak.
Yep. Anyways, but we all did this big river bottom hunt. Ended up, none of us killed any deer. Some of the guys had seen some shooters. I didn't see any. I didn't personally see a shooter while we were hunting, but called in, a few bucks running in, and it was kind of cool because we were hunting some spots in like really thick, swampy areas, and I'm telling you, dude, in that kind of habitat, I feel so confident calling, like grunting. Yeah. Like in the last 2-3 hunts I've had, like these little trips, I've called in probably like 6 or 7 bucks. Unfortunately, none of them being shooters, but it's like, dude, grunting, it is like, to me, it's so effective, man. It's so effective. Like, I just love it at this time of the year where it's like getting into the rut, pre-rut, throughout that first section of the rut. It's like, dude, it's so fun. But on the way in, we didn't talk about this last time. So on the way in, me and Seth were walking back into a pretty swampy area that we've had some history with. And on the way in the dark, I find this shed right here. So Pretty good shed.
Good one.
It's all chewed up. A couple years old, but he's got some really good mass on him. Good beam length. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool, to go find a shed in the dark. And this is an area I haven't found any sheds there. You found
I found five and a deadhead.
Yeah, 5 sheds back.
And they're all like the same size. They're all freaking big.
Yeah, they're all really good deer. So I'm like, that's kind of cool. Me and Seth keep walking back, and we get back to like close to where we're gonna go, and I find this bed. It was a frosty morning, frost is all over the leaves and everything. And we found this little bed, not a buck, not like a buck used. It might have been a coyote, might have been a doe fawn, just a small bed. I just kind of mentioned it to Seth. I'm like, man, something was just bedded here. It might have been a deer, might have been a coyote, who knows? But you can see with the frost around it, that bed's like all wet where the animal had been laid there and kind of melted the frost off. And I didn't realize, but I kind of go to walking and I see Seth get a little distracted, and he kind of like falls back a little bit. Well, we go up to this spot where we're going to cross, some water to get to this other part of the public. And I turn around and I'm like, hey, man. He's like, hey, let me show you what I found. And he pulls out from behind his bag another really good shed. I don't have it here because he took it with him, but it's a really nice 4-point side with a split G2. Just another great shed. I'm like,
Dude, we're calling that spot the Shed Factory.
Shed Factory, absolutely. And he was like, man, he's like, dude. I'm like, where was it? He's like, dude, I looked up with my headlamp, and not 15 yards away from that little bed was that shed.
It wasn't a match set, though.
No, it was just a shed, just a left side. And
that one wasn't chewed, was it?
No, it was from last year.
Yeah.
It was like a really good-looking shed. It might have been chewed just a touch, but it was a shed from last season. I'm pretty confident. So, anyways, we go through a hunt, calling this 2.5-3-year-old buck, not a shooter, let him walk, and we go hunt and hunt back in some other areas. Ended up not seeing much of anything. Well, when we're walking out, I'm falling on Onyx because I was telling some of the guys in camp, anytime I hunt some of these spots like this where it's not just a quick walk in and out, I always put my tracker on, even if I am familiar with the area. I just want to put my track on and see, like, especially if you get to cross water or anything like that, where you're marking exactly where the crossings are at.
Yep.
So when we walk out, I'm like, hey, we're going to stay on the same track when we go back out, and just so we don't get caught, by some water and we can't cross, because we had knee boots on, but we quickly realized knee boots aren't as effective back in here as I thought they would be. You really need like hip waders, because I went over my boot I think 3 times that day. That
sounds fun.
Yeah, definitely. But on the way back, 30 yards away from where I found this shed, I found the match side, the match set. Oh, Blaze Orange hat about to go, falling off the table. So I find his match side. So it is.
Are you sure that's from the same year?
I think so. This one was more under the leaves, I think. This one was like buried, or this one wasn't.
Let me see them suckers. This one was exposed.
Yep.
This one wasn't. Dude, I don't know, man. I don't think these are from the same year.
Maybe.
I don't think they are. Because look, like this one's kind of all like chalky
Mm-hmm.
looking, and this one's still pretty fresh looking. Yeah, dude, I don't know, bro.
I don't know. But that shed, the other side.
But they look so similar. They even have the
same characteristics.
Same characteristics. I think this could be one from like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. This could be one from 1 or 2 years. Like
maybe
more fresh. Because I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's the same deer. Because like, this probably isn't going to show up that great on these cameras for YouTube. But like, there's like he's got a little hole in the rack right here and a little bump where almost like where he was trying to grow a drop tine on the older shed, and then he has pretty much the exact same thing over here on this other shed, which is just really interesting and unique. Like, I don't see something like that very often. Again, it's probably not showing up really great on the camera because it's kind of small, but that's very interesting. I don't see that kind of characteristic very often, so it probably is the same deer.
Yeah, but it's, again, a left and right side. So with that other shed, okay, so say if that was from a different year, they were laying 30 yards apart. So I found it within 30 yards of where I had found the original shed.
Yeah.
In that same spot. So we found 3 sheds in the dark. And typically, I don't find any sheds in Alabama. Like, I struggle to find sheds. And
so that same area back there, I've done the same thing, finding several sheds all in the same area that all look very, very similar from multiple years. And I actually keep going because I'm about to go on a tangent that we're probably about to get on with this subject.
Well, no, it's just one of those interesting factors that, like, that makes 7-8 sheds that's been found in that area over the last couple of years in like I'm talking like a very small area, like maybe 20 acres, 10, 20 acres.
Yeah.
And again, in Alabama, typically I don't find a lot of sheds. Like, I kind of look for them, but like it's like in that area, like you don't even have to be looking for them. You're just gonna walk up on a shed. Like I was telling Seth while we were in there, I'm like, dude, if we walk some of these other little spots right here, we'll probably go find 3 or 4 more sheds. And it's like for whatever reason, like late season, maybe even after deer season when they're dropping antlers, these bucks just like hone in on this like little piece of public.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. Yeah, that kind of goes into what y'all were talking about when you were up there, which this particular spot, this is kind of like, I consider that spot like my baby, dude. Like, I, I've been so interested in that spot for so long, and me and you have hunted it several times.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone in there and scouted it pretty extensively, hunted it a little bit, but just the timing that this hunt falls every year is like kind of an awkward timing. Like it's kind of hard to go up there and hunt this place when it's good
Mm-hmm.
because we got so many other things going on. So it's always been a place where, we get like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hunts at a time, and then maybe the next year you don't hunt it, and then the year after that you hunt it a couple times.
Yeah.
And it's just like very on and off. It's a good area, but again, just logistically it's not like the easiest for us to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't hunted it a ton. And so this hunt came up, and first of all, poor planning on our part because everybody was there at like different times than we thought. So we were gonna rent like a big bunkhouse,
Mhm.
and we were gonna. It had like a ton of beds in it. Everyone was gonna stay there, and you were telling me to rent it from like the 30th to like the 7th,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody left on the 3rd or the 4th. I'm like, well, dang, bro, okay. So I wasn't able to. By the time I could get off work and go up there, I think it was like the night y'all were recording the podcast. By the time I could leave, because I was talking to Chris Leppert, everybody was leaving like the day I would come up. So I was like, man, I'm just not going to come up because I really just wanted to go up for the camp atmosphere. I wanted to hunt that spot, don't get me wrong, but I've got so much other stuff closer to the house that I'm also interested in hunting where I was just like, man, if everyone's pulling out, then I'm just going to go ahead and stay here. But I was talking to Chris the whole time. Chris came down from Ohio, and when the northern folks come down here to the south, they tend to struggle a little bit. So Chris sends a screenshot in the group text of where he's at because he's hunting the same place that I like the same general area I like to hunt, and he sends a screenshot of where he's at in the group text, and I see the screenshot and I immediately call him, and I'm like, hey man, like what's it looking like in there? He explains it. I'm like, you're probably seeing a lot of rubs, right? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, you probably found a couple good scrapes, right? He's like, yeah, there's a couple good ones. I'm like, leave. You're not in a good spot, man. Because I've hunted that spot. My buddy Kyle's hunted that spot. Another guy we know have hunted that spot. It's just not the deer are. It's your classic area where your deer are coming in there and laying down sign all night. But you're hunting there, and maybe you catch one cruising through there. There's a chance, that could happen, but you're not like on the X where you're gonna have a lot of action. And so,
but it's very deceptive because the sign's there.
Yeah, the sign is really impressive. But I was telling him, I'm like, man, I would get out of that spot.
Which,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that goes into maybe it's not necessarily a Q&A question, but like listeners who are like curious or audience members that are curious, like even though the sign's really good, what would tell you about like not hunting that spot? Because again, to the guy that rolls in, because I met another guy who rolled into camp, not in our group, but I helped him get his camp set up and everything, and he was going to go to that exact same spot. and I'm like, dude, you can do. He's like, man, I hunted here before, and he's like, man, I found some great sign in there. I think there's a really good deer. I'm like,
there probably is a really.
There
good
probably
deer.
is, but he might be coming through at 2:00 in the morning. And
Yeah.
You ain't gonna see him. And I texted him, he didn't have any luck.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a tough area, man, and it's a weird spot because it's the adjoining property is a trophy managed club, so there is for sure a big deer in there. The only problem is that whole hillside is like wide open. I mean, it for our standards, I didn't get to spend I didn't get to spend time in camp with Chris, but my experience, if you're hunting with guys who are used to hunting in like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, places like that, what they define as thick cover is very open down here. Like you remember when we did our scouting workshop, we had Drake come down, and he's from up north, and we were walking through these really open hardwoods, and there was just a little, like a smattering of saplings down in this bottom. See right through them. He's like, yeah, where I'm from, like we consider that thick cover. I'm like, that's as wide open around here. And so that area is kind of like that. Like it's just, again, you could absolutely catch one cruising through there like midday or something potentially, but you're not in a like what I would consider a high odd spot. So, anyways, I tell Chris that, and I told Chris about the Shed Factory, okay, that area. And Chris had already been looking at it on the map. You know, he thinks like we do. And Chris had been looking at it. And I think Chris, I'm pretty sure Chris is probably going to listen to this. I think that he was like trying to not go hunt it because he knew I wanted to come hunt it later in the week. But I'm like, dude, go. I don't care. Go in there and hunt it. Because even if he went in there day one and shot a buck, I would still feel very confident coming in there right behind him and hunting because there's more bucks in there. And so I don't know, he's kind of hesitant to go hunt that spot. I'm like, go hunt the spot, like it's a really good spot. And he never ended up going and hunting it. And then I said the same thing to you when we ended up talking because you were kind of unsure of what you wanted to do at that point. And I was like, go hunt the Shed Factory. We weren't calling it that at that point, but I'm like, please go hunt it. Somebody go hunt it because now I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to make it up there. So I'm like, okay, somebody please just go hunt it so I know whether or not it was worth a crap, you know? I know whether or not it was good. So next year, or whenever I get to make it back up there, I potentially know what's going on in there. So kind of using you guys as a little bit of a scouting tool, not going to lie. But anyways, so you ended up going in there finally.
Yeah.
Was that the last day?
Second to last. And again, we just saw that 2.5 or 3.5-year-old buck. I'm not sure. He was either like a really big bodied 2-year-old or like a really dinky antlered 3-year-old.
Okay.
And he came by like at 12 yards. I grunted him. He came across the water. He was like on another little bit of land. He actually bedded down over there at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we lost him in this little thicket. And then like almost noon, we were talking about getting down and moving. And like as I'm packing my stuff up, I look back behind me. I'm like, oh, we got a buck. There's a buck moving. There's a buck moving. Other bottoms up. I'm like, man, it's the same deer. I'm like, I'm just gonna grunt at him, see what he does. Then I did my little tinny grunt sequence, and dude, I'm telling you, like on a dime, he's walking, and without even stopping, he cuts left and comes right towards us, comes across the water, jumps some logs, and I mean comes to the base of Seth's tree.
Hunting like a marsh area.
Yeah. And he comes to like the base of Seth's tree, and then comes around me at like 12 yards. I'm like filming on my phone, Seth's filming with the camera, and he like loops around and and anyways, I knew when I'd seen him like he's not a shooter, but he loops around and kind of gets downwind, catches our wind, and kind of goes back out through that swampy stuff, and we got down after another 10-15 minutes. I'm like, hey, we're gonna reposition a different spot and go scout around a little bit more. And me and Seth were talking. He's like, man, I'm just gonna tell you right now. He's like, if we were in Texas, that deer right there, he's like, he would have been legal. He was 15-inch inside spread. You know, he would have been a legal buck. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm like,
should have shot him.
I'm like, we did. If I had 0 tags filled, probably would have shot him. But I'm like, we got 1 tag left, and I'm gonna try to hold out on a good one. But no, it was fun, dude. It was fun going back in there. It's a hellhole. I'll tell you that. So
it's really hard to get in there, but it's an interesting area. And this is what I wanted to bring up earlier, is the whole reason that I think we find all those sheds back there, and this is actually something I've been talking to several different folks about here lately in Alabama and in parts of, I guess, Mississippi as well, that have these later ruts, and Louisiana, that have these really late January ruts. And it's kind of weird because you're hunting from a habitat standpoint. This is about to be confusing what I'm saying, but from a habitat standpoint, you're hunting late season. You know, it's not, you know, quote, like when most people say it's quote unquote late season, they're talking about post rut.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm talking about post season or late season, it is from a habitat standpoint. All the leaves are down.
Vegetation standpoint.
Vegetation, all the leaves are down. Most of the green stuff is dead. Most of the acorns are gone. So you're hunting like a late season setting from a habitat standpoint. And because of that, it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse because people who have these January ruts, it's kind of a blessing because the deer end up getting really concentrated in certain areas, which on our SOA hunt is a good example of how it can be a blessing, which we'll talk about on Thursday. But it can be a curse because it is like absolute feast or famine. You are either on them or you are not.
And that's exactly how that hunt was. It's like,
yeah,
you know, Greg was absolutely on the X every single day about I know he said he climbed a couple different trees, but he about killed one tree climbing that sucker, dude. But he was on the X of where these bucks were coming through, and it's like me and Seth for the most part weren't like we saw a bunch of does, but just weren't seeing a bunch of rack deer,
Yeah.
and and then other guys like just struggle just to find deer in general. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is something I think too, because when you first said that, I was very confused on what you mean. But like, it's just that the vegetation setting, not really habitat, but vegetation setting is very much like late season. Like everything's died back. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely feel very confident, like in that November time frame when you still have some leaves on the trees, at least down here.
Yes.
But like leaves are turning, they're falling a little bit, but they're still like this like brushy leaf cover. It's like the deer move so well in that.
It's visual obstruction.
Yeah, and the deer move so well in that versus you fast forward another month and a half, and there's none of that left. It's just like it goes from like thick cover to wide open to thick cover again. And I think that at that point is when and that's when I've struggled specifically on a couple different pieces of public, which is when you start getting in January, and it's like that where like you have a hardwood SMZ next to pine thickets. And the hardwood SMZ during like October, November had like that brushy, leafed out kind of cover in it.
Yep.
And the deer would kind of shoot across it or work down it a little bit.
Yep.
Now when it's wide open, it's like they might come to the edge of it and start paralleling it, but they're not necessarily cutting us right across it. And I actually saw a guy posting one of the public land groups in Alabama hunting a piece of public. And he's like, man, it's kind of like where he was at. It's like post rut. He's like, man, I ain't filled a tag yet, but I'm still going after it. And he's hunting. I'm talking about a wide open SMZ, like a huge SMZ, wide open hardwood bottom. And I'm like, dude, you're probably not gonna find a deer there. Like you probably won't have many does come through that stuff.
Yeah.
Especially after all the hunting pressure.
Yeah, but I mean, exactly. And going back to the MSU deer study that we covered, man, I can't remember the episode number, but it must have been probably 4 weeks ago now. 3 or 4 weeks ago now, we went over a Mississippi State University paper on buck movement. And when in the section where they were talking about buck bedding, a big part of that formula was visual obstruction. So they take it looks like a big giant checkerboard that they bring out, black and white checkerboard, and they literally measure the visual obstruction in front of that board. What episode number?
It's episode 540. How, when, and why bucks navigate the landscape. MSU buck movement GPS study.
So they're talking about buck bedding in that, and again, they're using that obstruction board where they're actually measuring the actual visual obstruction there, and these deer are selecting for cover where they have better visual obstruction. And I think the point that we're trying to make here is like early season up until leaf drop happens, there's pretty good visual obstruction all over the place. Like early season. Even your more open hardwoods are still going to have some element of cover going through them.
Or pines, same
or
thing.
pines, because you're not going to be able to see 250 yards through there. There's going to be saplings. There's going to be just stuff growing that obstructs that, and it's lower pressure, so they're going to feel more comfortable laying out in what we would consider, quote unquote, the wide open. In that situation, maybe you can see 50 yards. Now, this time of year, where all of a sudden in those same hardwoods you can see 200 yards because now everything is fallen, and they've had months of hunting pressure, including in Alabama at this point. They've had, 2.5 months of gun pressure at this point, or a month and a half, I guess, of gun pressure. Now, I feel like they get so sucked back into that cover, into that really, really thick, aggressive, nasty briar hellhole thicket cover, that it gets really hard to get in an area where you can actually see them because they're still moving in that during the day. But in the really good patches of cover, they've got everything they need in there. They've got browse in it. They're probably bedded in close proximity to water. And a lot of those bucks, there's a high doe density in a lot of areas in Alabama. So that's why this January hunt, I feel like January rut is actually really difficult in a lot of areas, more so than a November rut in comparable areas, because of that reason, because they're so sucked into that cover that it's a lot harder to actually get a shot at these deer because they don't feel as comfortable walking through that wide open bottom as they did back in November when we still had leaf cover. But what are your thoughts on that?
Tune in for Thursday. to hear about me and my hiccups with a couple bucks in this exact same situation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I feel like, again, I wasn't on this hunt, but you guys explained everything to me. I listened to the episode that you guys did. I guess it was probably last week,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
I heard y'all's episode from last week about the struggles you were having, and it sounds like that was the situation. Like these deer were concentrated in one area, and that's why I think the shed factory is so good, because I think those bucks are in there right now, and that's why I think it's such a good area. And you guys saw that younger deer in there that one morning, but I think that if you potentially put 3 or 4 days into that area, you could have an encounter with a really, really, really good buck, like the kind of bucks that are leaving these sheds laying around. And the reason being is because all the leaves have fallen off. The habitat has completely changed, but this area back in here is still high stem count. It's got a lot of browse, and I think the deer are gonna. I think they're already gravitating to it. And this is on public. There's a lot of private around it, and I think they're going out onto the private at night. You
Hmm.
can zoom in on the map, and you can see everyone's corn feeders on the private land.
Yeah.
So I think they're bedding on the public, and they're going off onto the private, and that's why it's so good. I think that right now they get concentrated in there, and they're probably staying in there into the spring, and that's why all these sheds are in that specific area.
Yep.
So, anyways, I'm really excited to get to hunt it at some point. Probably, maybe next year. Who knows? Maybe we can make it happen with the timing. But again, it's just in a weird area. Timing's kind of hard. We got so much going on that time of year. But anyways, do you have anything else on that hunt? Kind of how it ended? Any lessons learned? I know that when I talked to you after the hunt, you were like you didn't want to see a river bottom again.
Yeah.
You were pretty burned out on river bottoms.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm tapping out of the river bottoms. It's whew, man.
They've been good to me this year.
Yeah, but I go back to like when we were in Arkansas
Mhm.
and like the cover compared to now.
Yeah.
A lot more cover that early part of November compared to January, late December. So I think that's
Yeah.
a huge factor because my brothers try to hunt out there late season.
Mm-hmm. It's tough.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's like where I shot both of my bucks. That particular spot, you could see at the absolute furthest maybe 75 yards,
Mhm.
and this is like a rut funnel, so it's not. It's an area where deer are gonna just transition through anyways. They're not like spending time there, like they when they're and you could tell when they're coming through, they're coming through. They're not stopping and feeding or doing anything like that. They're just trying to get from point A to point B. But you can see like 75 yards through there. But that spot's probably another area where the leaf drop really happens. You get a couple hard frosts come through probably by Thanksgiving, and you could probably see a lot further through that area. And those deer probably do not like to walk across that.
No. I think there's a huge difference between hunting that, October, November time frame, especially from I haven't hunted Kentucky. Maybe we'll hunt Kentucky next year or something like that. But like when you start getting some of these states, like my experience in Arkansas, for example, like mid-November, even late November, it's still like there's a decent amount of cover.
Yeah.
But God, dude, like on that hunt we just did. I mean, there was guys that killed deer, like not guys that we personally knew, but like Miles knew some guys that killed some bucks, and I heard from some other guys that killed some bucks on that hunt. And never pressed to ask questions of like situation of like how an area kind of laid out when it came to habitat. But yeah, it's different, man. It's real different, super different.
Yeah.
So it could be very, very rewarding, but also you could like be sitting in a spot that looks good and just don't see anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a couple areas that we'd found that I wish maybe you would have put more time into. Just some like different like peninsulas and different like cover types where like you could tell there's deer out there and they're kind of working their way back. It's just like another thing about river bottoms I think we all kind of figured out is like even in a river bottom, man, that wind likes to just drift different directions. Like you really need like a pretty good front coming through where you get like a very distinct wind to keep it from like eddying, because like when you start talking about like mixed habitat edges where you have like big timber next to like sapling thickets that's only like 8-10 foot tall, next to like grassy areas, next to ag, next to all this kind of stuff. The way that wind works coming through those areas, it's kind of like bouncing off a bunch of different things, and it'll start swirling in different spots.
Yeah.
And Shane talked about this on the episode from last week, where like those areas can be like very productive for finding bucks because they want to check those areas, those wind swirls. But it's like hard to hunt them, especially bow hunting them, because you got to get right there in amongst them. And like while you're in there, and they're probably checking that area, your wind's swirling too, and it's just it's tough.
Yeah,
It really is.
Yeah, definitely. It could be super tough. All right, you want to get some
Yeah,
Q&As?
let's get some Q&As. So appreciate everybody's been submitting Q&As. Again, you can go down to the show notes below in this audio feed podcast or on YouTube and submit your Q&As. There's a link down there. You can submit your Q&As, and we'll try to answer those in some of these episodes. So we were talking about trying to do a few more of these full-length Q&A question episodes, just because some of you guys have been writing. It's been really kind of awesome getting some of the feedback. And it's been really interesting where some of you guys have actually been implementing some of the things that's being discussed on the Q&As and actually going out there and killing really nice deer.
Yeah. All right, this is first one up. This is from Matt Cockrell from Alabama. He said, I really appreciate that y'all never name the public land you are hunting. You even keep the SOA names quiet. Can y'all discuss how you balance talking about public land deer hunting but being careful about hot spotting a place? I hate to see YouTubers being lazy with their videos, showing landmarks, and even flat out naming the piece of public they are hunting. Several years ago, I didn't know any better and posted some pics and stories from some public land success I had. I quickly learned that was a mistake. Man, this is a total rabbit hole right here. Yeah, we're like super careful about actually naming places. Not only just for like the selfish reason of we don't want to flood that area because it'll make it harder for us to hunt, but also out of respect for the other people that hunt there, because there's nothing that sucks more, and we personally know people who this has happened to, where some YouTubers come or some podcasters talk about an area and they name drop a place, and maybe it's a big giant national forest, but that doesn't matter, especially if it's a really big platform, really big YouTube channel, really big podcast. The pressure that can put on an area is actually like quite significant.
Yeah.
And so it's just a respect thing, because now all of a sudden, let's say that me and you go to an area that we don't normally hunt. Let's say we go out of state and we don't even name it, but maybe we just don't do our due diligence with hiding where we're at, and it's pretty easy to find out. Enough people listen to the podcast that the locals there can get like super screwed over by that, because all of a sudden you're going to get a bunch of non-resident pressure. Ask Shane Parker about this. Where he turkey hunts. It happened to him a couple years ago. Big YouTube channel came into town, hunted there, killed a bunch of turkeys, and it got and they this particular YouTube channel, they do their due diligence. They try to not name a place. They try to not give away like obvious answers, but they just didn't do a good enough job with this area, man.
Yeah.
And it got hammered.
Well, didn't Wayne go up there? Someone went up there and said they counted 24, 27 different out-of-state tags.
Yeah, and I know 3 or 4 guys who have hunted this area for decades, and they've never seen an increase in non-resident pressure like that.
Yeah,
and so
it's
clearly that's where it came from.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I'm all for people like going out and doing that kind of thing. Like if you want to go to a different state and go hunt, come to Alabama and experience a January rut. If your season closes January 1st, by all means do it. But it's like there's a fine line by like it'd be cool to have some of you guys come down and experience it, and then also there's a fine line between that and then also just like highlighting a specific piece of public and just either knowing or maybe not thinking it would have the impact it could have, and the next thing you know, there's maybe it's just 500 people show up, maybe it's 1,500 people show up over the course of a season or something like that. And yeah, it's kind of looking out for the local guys, to be 100% honest, and especially like if we go out of state, like again, if we go someplace and we're like, man, this place sucks, even if it sucks, like we don't have success there, we're not going to name it just out of respect for those guys that are locals that are hunting it, because there's no good to that. Also doing like scouting videos where you're highlighting different pieces of public that maybe you don't personally hunt, but you're trying to do it for like examples of how you would hunt something. That's not great either, because again, you're showing in a video specific piece of public that kind of gets your attention. You might never step foot on it, but the couple thousand people that watch that video, or tens of thousands of people that watch that video, maybe a super small fraction of a percent of people decide to go there, and then all the locals has been hunting it, they have to reap the reward of a video that you made.
Yeah, man, and it's kind of like I can see both sides of it, both from because we are podcasters. This is what we do, but it might not seem like a big deal, like to somebody like us, where you're just getting into this and you're trying to grow your business or whatever you're trying to do your thing, and it might not seem like a huge deal, and you probably have absolutely zero ill intent,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know the impact that has on people. So it's like, especially naming a place or showing actual public land on a map is like immensely disrespectful, and it can be immensely damaging to that piece of public. It's like, dude, just imagine, we know someone who this happened to,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows who he is. I guess you know the story better than me, but basically a big channel was showing where he hunts on a map. I mean, straight
No,
up.
it doesn't, like, those people don't know this guy,
No, they don't know him.
but
But they were using it as an example map, and
Yeah.
it was like right where he had killed a nice buck.
yeah,
And he was like, he's sitting there watching it. He's like, oh my God.
yeah, absolutely. And it's like hours upon hours away from where these guys are making, where they lived at and made the video. They probably have no intention to ever go down there and hunt, but just because they were using it as an example, it freaked him out.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's seen. I can't remember if he told me if he's seen any increase of people at that parcel, but they were showing everything on X of like, oh, this looks real good. I'd hunt it like this, and coming from this direction, this hub looks real good. This edge looks real good. And it was all very close to where he had just shot a real big deer.
Yeah, and from the guys who made that video, again, they probably had absolutely no ill intent, and they're probably in fact trying to help people.
Mhm.
But at the same time, in your head, it could be like, oh, it's a 300,000 acre national forest. Like, what's the we'll just pick a random spot and go through that. But the reality is somebody hunts that.
Yeah.
Somebody hunts every part of that national forest. If there's anything I've figured out in the last couple of years or the last decade plus of hunting public, it's that there's not the spot no one else hunts. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist. Somebody knows about it.
Yeah.
And so you're like really kind of screwing that person over. And so yeah, you just got to be careful about that. And we even, I mean, truth be told, on this show we used to let it slide. If a guest accidentally name drop a place, or they just didn't care and they'd name drop it, and it was like a really big national forest or something, we would let that slide sometimes. There's old episodes where that's still out there.
Mhm.
And then we started talking to people, like, again, the people that we mentioned who we know who have actually been affected by it, and we're like, okay, even if it is like a gigantic national forest, it's still not okay in my opinion.
Mhm.
Especially if you have a platform, and people argue about, going and taking your picture in front of a WMA sign, which is a very Alabama thing.
I think a lot of people in Georgia do it too.
Yeah.
I don't see many people in Tennessee. People definitely don't do it in Arkansas that I've seen.
Yeah.
Tennessee, same way. But like, I think that's kind of like a culture thing. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely, I'll be honest, I use that if I'm social media scouting and trying to like learn about, like, I'm already interested in an area, but I'm like,
Let's be honest. You see a guy sitting in front of the freaking sign of an area you've already been thinking about, and he's got a 140. You're like, okay.
Yeah, and the thing is, and a lot of people talk about this as well, like, oh man, you ain't gonna have any success hunting a dead deer. 100% true. The thing that I look at that is it a consistent factor of like certain quality bucks come out certain areas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that's typically going to get a little bit more attention than just like if one real big deer gets killed in an area that's not known for big deer, people might flood the area and they might kill, some smaller bucks, but they kind of realize very quickly there's not a lot of big deer running around. The pressure kind of dies back off. But those areas that are like consistently successful, producing really big bucks in like different parts of the Southeast, if they get put out there, a lot of stuff can change. Like I know somebody talked about this in the great state of Mississippi, where like some stuff had happened back in like, I don't know, 2018, 2019. And from that point on, it went downhill because he got flooded with pressure. A lot of guys were killing a lot of deer that probably wouldn't have been killed previously because people were trying to truly hunt for big deer, but it got real popular. And then now it's like hard to find some of those really big deer because it's just like so many deer potentially, from what I've heard from this individual, are getting killed that like it's not producing the kind of bucks they were producing 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's an interesting conversation there. But what's another Q&A? Not to take up too much time with that one.
Yeah, that one's a little little spicy, right?
Yeah.
A little controversial.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say like, look, if you're making YouTube videos, like just don't name the place.
Yeah.
Like don't use public land on the map. Like when we do an example map, we just use either a state park that is not huntable, or some random private land just somewhere out there. You can do that. It's perfectly legal. Just use private land. You know, because it doesn't matter if you use some random private land.
Especially if it's just an example map of how an area, somewhat sets up.
Yeah, I'm not saying go hunt random private land.
No, but just like using it in like example maps.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2. This is from Hoyt R. From Alabama. Hey guys, love the show. Thanks for all of the great content. How would you tell where a buck was bedding if you were getting him on a scrape around 12 to 1 a.m., assuming you can't put out additional cameras to track him? The cam is on video, and I can see his direction of entry and exit, but just unsure if he'd be heading to feed or back to bed at that middle of the night hour. I'm in west central Alabama, bottomland and pine plantation. There's ample bedding cover in every direction and a couple bi-directional rub lines heading in different directions. I'd be curious if Shane has any input in this after his trail cam study. Hopefully this doesn't get y'all talking too much about moon phase / position. Thanks. All right. Well, let me tell you, if the moon is 3/4, what are your thoughts on this?
Good luck, man. I mean, if he's showing up midnight to 1 a.m., there's no telling where that deer's bedded. I mean, the second he said that, I'm like, it'd be one thing if it was within an hour or two of dark and like an hour or two of daylight, in the morning. I think you could maybe start circling stuff within like 400 yards of there that maybe would like catch your attention. But if he's coming through, 6 hours after dark, 7 hours after dark, and, roughly that long before daylight, I mean, dude, that deer could be coming from a long ways away potentially, or maybe not. You don't know. But like when we've looked at, again, going back to that episode 540 with the Mississippi State University deer movement study, buck movement study, a lot of those bucks, their home range, especially like during the rut, I mean, it kind of depended on whether or not they were like a more transient buck or more like homebody buck. They're not huge areas, but it's still like 4, 5, 6, 800 acres, something like that. So it's like, you might get him on camera in one area, but he might be spending most of his time during daylight hours 200 yards from there, or it might be an area 800 to 1,000 yards or further away. So I mean that's super tough, and to me it also depends on like, are you hunting private land that's really small little chunks of private, or public, or are you hunting like a bigger piece of private land? It all kind of like there's so many factors there that I think that's like a hard situation to try to narrow down a buck that's coming through that late at night. I mean, it tells you he's there, but like that doesn't give me any confidence that like he's killable anywhere in that general location. I think you're going to have to, if you can't put cameras out, then you're going to have to start covering ground. I mean, within, I say outside of 400 to 500 yards of that spot, and just see, are you finding any big sign? Are you cutting any big tracks? Is he like an upper echelon body and like antler-sized deer like that might be leaving a little bit bigger sign, bigger tracks, bigger rubs, stuff like that. And just trying to find sign that might tell you that a deer of his caliber may be using a different portion of that property.
Yeah, I'm gonna make some assumptions based on like just the information that we have here. Assuming you can't put out additional cams to backtrack him, that either means you're out of property or you're out of cameras, right?
Yeah.
I would like if you're out of cameras, like if you only got a couple cameras and you're getting him on that scrape, I would leave the camera on the scrape personally, because that annual data of, okay, let's say he's showing up at 1 a.m. and then bam, one day he's there at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Which we've had quite a few bucks.
I've had that happen a lot on scrapes. Like if you're on the right community scrape. So I would leave the camera there for that reason. And man, whether or not he's going to feed or bedding is kind of a crapshoot. But I think the silver lining to this would be that there is a reason that he's coming through there, especially if you're getting kind of closer to the rut. Like in my opinion, I think they kind of come through and they're checking does, or they're just kind of cruising through the area, seeing what's going on leading up to the rut. So I still take it as a good sign that he's kind of coming through there. So, maybe you're getting him a couple weeks before peak rut, and he's coming through, at 1 o'clock in the morning. Because we have had guests. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but we have had guests where they have said, "Hey, if you get this buck like 3 times on that camera, it doesn't matter if he's there at 1 o'clock in the morning. Like at some point, he's gonna daylight there at some point, or just in the general area. Like he's coming through for a reason.
Yeah.
So it's only a matter of time before he screws up, especially during the rut. So I mean, I take it as a good sign that you got him on camera. As far as like trying to backtrack him, I don't know. Like I just don't know what your situation is, so it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, and also a factor I think with this, because I would go back to like this gigantic 6-point that we get on camera like for a good portion of December, and then he disappeared. He might have got shot, or he might just moved off. But
Well, he wasn't there at first. We put that camera out, and he didn't really show up. I think we might have got one picture of him. I'm putting my feet up. Sorry, I'm making sound. I think we might have got one picture of him. And I think it was a middle of the night picture. I think it was like 11 p.m.
Yeah.
And then, man, I'll tell you what, a doe must have come in heat. And then all of a sudden, for 2 weeks, if you had hunted in there for a couple days in a row for over this 2-week period, you'd have got a crack at that joker.
Yeah.
I mean, he was all over those cameras during daylight.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're getting a bunch of does on camera, or like does every now and then coming on camera, like Andrew's saying, like you're saying, maybe leave that camera there and see how it plays out. But again, whether he's going to go bed feed, he's probably just cruising. I mean, he's going to browse at some point, but he's probably just cruising through there, just checking a bunch of different areas right now, especially if you're kind of coming into your rut in that area of the state, which right now, by the time we're recording this podcast, is probably getting really good where you're at. So I would just keep tabs, like Andrew, like what you're saying. I'd just keep tabs on that spot and see if anything else changes. And maybe some other bucks show up during daylight. But like also take into a factor, are you in wide open woods that would really kind of dictate maybe more nighttime movement? Or is there some kind of, cover type in that area or around that area that deer could be using as well? And, maybe he's checking that scrape from, 60 to 100 yards downwind, maybe in a little bit more of a cover edge. There's a bunch of different factors there, but, there's no telling if he's going to back to bed right then or going to feed. He's probably going to be covering some more ground, checking some more scrapes, maybe running some rubs, checking on some doe groups, browsing a little bit before he decides to go back to bed, how far that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, a lot of people have different opinions on this, but from just me personally, if I've got like a really nice buck and he's showing up at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm still fired up because I know there's a chance. Like he is coming through there for a reason. Especially if it wasn't just one picture you got one time. If you've got him on there several times, like I'm feeling actually really, really good about that situation because at some point, like, why is he coming through there? It's probably not for. If he's talking about it's a bottomland and pine plantation, he's probably not coming through there for a food source. He's probably checking does or something, in my opinion.
Yep.
So, as the rut draws closer and you kind of learn your does and learn when they come into heat in that area. For instance, where you're talking about having that big giant 6-point on camera.
Yeah.
So, right now, it is January 14th. Over the last week, there has been bucks being killed out there by the scores in that general area.
Mm-hmm.
People have been killing. I texted one of our buddies that lives up there. I was like, hey, what are y'all seeing right now? He sends me a couple pictures of hammers that are getting killed right now. And everyone's saying, like, the rut is from Christmas to, like, right now. Like, we're probably on the tail end of it over there. But in this particular spot, in this one drainage that we hunt, that early December time frame, there are some does that live in there, and we got 2 years in a row now, and so now I'm positive this is the case.
Yep.
That there's must be a couple does that live in that drainage that come into heat significantly earlier than everything else, and those bucks, man, get sucked into that area, and that's when that big giant 6-point started showing up. And when we killed our bucks out there last year, everyone who was local, who we talked to about hunting in there, who kind of knew where we were hunting, and we told them what we saw. They're like, wow, like you saw chasing deer win? Like, you saw does getting chased win? Because it was so early compared to their normal rut, but we were learning those does.
Yeah.
So, if you could get in a similar situation to that's been really good to us. But even not even necessarily trying to find early does, but just learning the does, like, that's why I'm saying leave the camera on the scrape, because if you're getting him at 1 o'clock in the morning and then all of a sudden he starts showing up during daylight or really close to daylight a couple days in a row, or you get like 1 or 2 weeks of just action on that camera, you got a bunch of different bucks showing up, or you got does working the scrape, that's what you pay attention to right there, in my opinion, again, especially if I got does working the scrape. The other day, I put a camera out on another piece of public that I've actually never ran cameras on, had a doe work the scrape, and then over the next 2 or 3 days, I had an 8-point, a 10-point, and another like clear shooter buck that I can't really tell exactly what he is, but he's an obvious shooter. They all showed up within 2 days after the doe worked the scrape, and that's something that Shane Parker has talked about. He's if you got a doe like working a licking branch, working a scrape really hard, like pay attention.
Yep.
Because that's telling you something.
Yeah. And if you have one doing that, you might, especially if you're running a cell camera and you get, instant notification on that, might want to plan to go in the next couple days and hunt.
All right. I texted Shane. To get an answer on this, because I figured hopefully he would get back to us. Shane Parker. I sent him a screenshot and I said, "What are your thoughts on this?" He said, "I actually had a buck this year doing the exact same thing, showing up every other night at 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. I had a bunch of cameras out around this area and pulled half of them this week. He ended up being on daylight a lot right outside of where I thought he was probably bedding at. It wasn't more than 300 yards away from where he was showing up in the middle of the night. I thought he was coming in from a long way off, but the more I think about it, he was just watching that area he was coming to at midnight and wasn't far away at all. Really eye-opening. I think it's a spot they visit in the middle of the night on a schedule. They're not far away." Okay, so that's like awesome. That's really good to hear. Shane talked about that. So basically what Shane is saying there is he had the same situation, but the deer was not that far away. Again, hunting an area that is classic Alabama, pine plantations, thick stuff. The deer is actually not that far away. He's got ample food, ample cover in every direction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing to consider is if you got ample food and ample cover in every direction, why do they have to range 3.5 miles? They really don't have to. So just because you're getting them at midnight doesn't mean he's living in that, it doesn't mean that he's living in a completely separate area.
Yeah.
So thanks, Shane. Appreciate you getting back to me quick on that one. Because when I read that question, I was like, crap, I forgot to text Shane about that.
Did you just text him that?
I literally just texted him.
Nice.
At 8, he read it at 8:42. It's 8:50 right now.
Nice.
So pretty legit. Appreciate it, Shane. All right. This is from Darian.
Oh, I forgot to mention.
Oh.
With a name like Hoyt, his dad must have won that battle naming him and must be a pretty big bow hunter. Just had to mention that.
All right. Darian Moss from upstate South Carolina. He said, recently I've lost access to the 120 acres of private that I've grown up hunting. Therefore, I'm looking to start hunting the local WMA's National Forest and some other land around me. This is a new ballgame to me, so my question is, how do I need to go about this process? I pull up OnX maps, and the amount of land is a little overwhelming, so what advice, if any, could you give to an experienced private land hunter but an inexperienced high-pressure public land hunter? Jacob was just clapping. He was excited. What you got?
I'm going to look up the episode for him.
So, okay, while you're looking up that episode, I'll just say it's like eating an elephant, man, one bite at a time. If you got like a large, let's say you have a large national forest next to you, you got to tackle it in a way where you take it in bite-sized chunks. So you're not looking at 100,000 acres. You're looking at 100 acres. You narrow it down. A past guest of ours, Wes Moe, talks a lot about that. That's his whole thing is he hunts big giant pieces of public like this, and he takes them and he narrows them down into smaller areas, and it's bite-sized chunks, and he learns that area really good. Now, how do you pick the area? How do you take that 100,000 acres and narrow it down to 100 acres? And I think the advice probably that you would give too is look for an area with a lot of diversity. So habitat diversity, you're looking for multiple habitat types. You got pines, hardwoods, cut over, whatever it is. It really actually doesn't matter that much what the habitat type is, just that there's a bunch of different habitat types coming together in one general area that's going to hold a lot more deer than anything else. So take that and there's your starting point and start fanning out from there. And, you don't have to learn the whole property. You just have to learn the right part of the property.
Yep, absolutely. The episode that Wes Moe actually talks about this very specific topic is episode 146 from back in January of 2020. and it's killing pressured whitetails with West Moe. And he talks specifically about this in that episode where, back when he first started hunting public. Now he's been hunting a lot of these same pieces of public since like the 80s, so he like really knows these areas quite well. But he talks about, if I remember correctly, finding like 1,000-acre section or 300-acre section, and just a square section, and just learning it, walking a ton. This is well before any kind of digital maps. It was a paper map, making sure you're on public, and then just finding a section of that you really want to learn and go walk it. Now with like sources like OnX, you can really do it even quicker, I think, because you can really look at the map and figure out what has the best habitat edges, the best habitat diversity, but also maybe has some fairly decent access for you to get in there, because there's a double-edged sword with that. It's like you can find some really good habitat diversity. It's like really hard to get into. It's really hard to access. You're probably going to find some really good deer there, but the thing is, if you're kind of new to like the public land game and understanding like how hunting pressure affects these deer when you're been used to like maybe hunting a property that's been exclusively like only you hunting it, it can be kind of overwhelming because you find something that looks really good and you pull up on a Saturday morning and you're used to maybe getting to your farm at like 30 to 40 minutes before daylight, and you try to do that on public land, and there's already 7 trucks parked there.
And they already in the tree.
Yeah, so that's a huge factor. So another factor going on to that, a factor I would say, if you're getting into hunting public land, get there early, especially on a morning and afternoon hunt. Don't try to pull up 2 hours before dark and try to get into a spot, because there's a decent chance, unless you're maybe hunting during the week, there's probably going to be somebody else there, especially if it's an area that looks pretty good on a map. You're going to have company. Some states, I'll say this, like there's some places in Alabama that I hunt that you'll only ever see one truck parked at a gate. And I think like each piece of public, it's got their own, they have their own code of ethics, I feel like, where you have like say there's like a couple hundred guys, a couple hundred hunters that like really hunt a piece of public. It might just be like, because of how the culture is, if there's a truck already parked at a gate, nobody else is necessarily parking there and walking in. Okay. Versus you go to some other pieces of public and you'll see 7, 8, 10 trucks parked at a gate, and it's completely different there. Like, man, I'm not saying the code of ethics are different, but it's like typically if I see a guy parked at a gate, I don't know where he's at behind the gate, so I'm not going to necessarily try to walk in there on him. I'll just try to go find a different gate or pull off on the side of the road where there's not someone parked at and go into a different area that maybe I'm familiar with or looks good on the map. But like when you're new starting out, that can be very overwhelming, especially if you're in a state where maybe like you go to a piece of public, there's only a couple access points where there's actually like parking areas, and you get there and there's a bunch of other trucks there. That can be kind of overwhelming for you. And that's where kind of going back and maybe not parking at specific parking areas or gates and parking more off the side of the road can really play more of a factor for you, because say there's at the end of a dead end road that's like 2 miles long, there's a parking area and there's always trucks parked there. Well, go a mile down the road and then park and then walk in. You'll probably have a lot less company there, because for whatever reason, I feel like a lot of hunters are like this. I've been guilty of it too. Is your thought process is, oh man, I got to get to that access point, okay, and walking from that access point, because maybe it's easier walking. Maybe there's a logging road you can walk down. Maybe there's it's a gated road and it's an easy walk getting back into a spot, and then you can jump off there and get in the woods. Well, if you can kind of get out of that habit and start parking in areas that's just right off the side of the road on that piece of public, again, where it's safe, you can get off, easily. You're not parked in the road, you're parked off the shoulder of the road, so people can still get by you, and preferably have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, so if it's wet, you don't get stuck there. You can get away from a lot of those people, and also a lot of times you don't have to walk as far in the woods because the deer aren't necessarily used to having pressure coming from that direction. Yeah. So you might literally be able to walk in a couple hundred yards and find really good sign and find a really good spot that you could have success with, versus going to a major parking area where some guys may be hunting close to the parking area, some guys may be walking in a long ways, and it's a little bit more unpredictable about where people are actually hunting at, versus if you just get off the side of the road and maybe just go in a couple hundred yards and find some really good sign.
Yeah, definitely. And also, if you're trying to select the actual parcel, like you named a couple different types of public land that he might be interested in hunting, it also comes down to what are the regulations for that piece of public land. So, are you a bow hunter? Are you only interested in bow hunting? Maybe you kind of gravitate towards bow only areas then, because those are probably going to have better buck quality also. Or maybe you're a gun hunter like us. Like we kind of seek out gun hunting opportunities. So that's another thing to consider. Antler point restrictions, it just depends. Like, do you want to deal with antler point restrictions? Like you're trying to target like a really big deer, so you're trying to seek those out, or are you just trying to go kill some deer, man? And you really don't want to deal with antler point restrictions.
Mhm.
Both of those are totally fine, but go research those pieces of public, whether it's WMA National Forest or the other type of public that you named. uh, go look at those regulations, which one's going to offer like the best mix of what you want, and then go do the thing that we're talking about where you narrow that down into one area, look at your maps, maybe identify a couple different areas that meet that diversity criteria, jump in there, speed scout, and find the best one. And, it's January 14th right now at the time we're recording this. So, this is actually a really good time of year to do that. Go in there and look at it. If your rut's already happened, then all of that sign is already there for you to see. You can walk in, you can go find the rubs, you can find the scrapes, you can find the trails, whatever else is out there. You can go find the tracks this time of year, and see where those deer are hanging out, and you're gonna be able to use that information for next year. And even if you got cameras, if you lost permission and now all of a sudden you got a bunch of cameras you're not doing anything with, you can go ahead and put those out now and start figuring out who made it through the season or who's likely going to make it through the season. Even if you've still got, like here in Alabama, if I'm hunting an area that's post rut,
Mhm.
like our local place, if I'm hunting an area that's post rut and I go run cameras out there and I get a picture of this deer like next week, and I know that we've got a little bit of season left, but it's post rut, I'm like, okay, he made it. Because like the chances of him getting killed this time of year out there are very slim.
Mhm.
So you could go do that, and you can go ahead and have some target bucks potentially for next season, or at least have an area of like what, or an idea of what you're chasing. So also keep all that in mind when you're choosing that piece of public. In pretty much every state we've ever hunted, all these different pieces of public are managed different, whether it's federal, state, or something else. So just make sure you're up on the regs, and pick the area that is going to be the most conducive to like your style of hunting and what you like to do.
Yep.
So do you have anything else to add
No,
to that?
no, super easy. Boots on the ground, it's the biggest thing. Dang,
Dude, I'm losing my voice. It's not
you're
good.
losing your voice and you've been squirming this whole time, dude. I
know.
mean,
I'm getting kind of sick or something. I don't know. All these cold January days getting to me, bro.
You're getting soft. That's what you're doing. No, just I mean, boots on the ground. You got to walk a lot. That's something I've been trying to do more so, and just learn more areas. And especially when you're starting out, and really even when you've been doing it for a while, the more you can walk and learn areas, the better off you're going to be. You're going to find the better sign, better habitat areas that are maybe a little bit less pressure that bucks are kind of slipping into if you are trying to target, say a mature buck. All that factor come down, or it all factors and comes down to boots on the ground in those areas. Cameras can help a lot, but like, you still got to be able to walk those areas out and figure out like what's the best areas, what's the best sign, best train features, the whole 9 yards, and go in there and put boots on the ground, see how it looks. And my goal this year, I'm going to try to do a lot more postseason scouting. There's a couple parcels that I'm really interested in walking postseason and learning a lot better so I have a better understanding going into next year. Where are areas that had a lot of sign from this past season, but also has a lot of good cover, a lot of good train features, the whole 9 yards, and that's something I'm going to really try keying on this
Oh
year.
yeah, dude. And hey, it's January, baby. It's the time of New Year's resolutions. So if you're gonna go out here, imagine this, okay? Imagine if you chose whatever piece of public you're wanting to hunt, you're kind of narrowing it down, and you set the goal of just an arbitrary goal that's gonna like force you to go and really do it. Say, okay, here's this 1,000 acres I'm interested in. I Before green up, so before like mid-March, I'm gonna walk 30 miles in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna cover 30 miles. I'm gonna use my Onyx tracker. I'm gonna turn it on every time I go, and I'm gonna add everything up, and I'm gonna get 30 miles. Can you imagine how well you would know that area if you legitimately did that?
Yep.
That's a really good. Maybe that's something that maybe I'm gonna use that this year. I've never done that before. Maybe I'm gonna try it because if you commit to that and you cover that much ground in there,
Dude, that might be a cool little challenge to do on the podcast.
that could be
With like
real.
all the audience members, like, hey, at a certain date, season comes to wrapping up.
Yeah.
We do a little challenge, and then from a listener standpoint, now listen, you can't be using your tracker on OnX in your truck now, okay? All right.
Bunch of cheaters.
Yeah, but maybe we do a little competition. Who racks up the most miles? Between you and me,
Oh,
but
yeah.
also incorporate the audience members, and maybe we give something
We
away.
can do that. I mean, we can do that if you want to get smoked, son.
I don't know, dude. I might have a little bit more time than you to do it.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
But also, you're a damn mountain goat. Walk through the woods. I ain't that speedy. So, but anyway, no. But appreciate everybody leaving us the Q&As. Has been awesome, kind of answering some of these. Again, you can submit yours down in the show notes below. There's a link down there. You can get them submitted. Also, appreciate all the listener success stories coming in. Again, if you've been killing deer, implementing stuff you've heard about on the podcast, whether it's from us, from a podcast guest, whoever, write it in. Again, there's a link down in the show notes below for that as well, along with on just the website. Again, you can go to thesouthernoutdoorsman.com and submit your listener success stories there. Still got a bunch to go through. Angie's got to work on those posts because there's a bunch that came in. Some of you guys have been knocking down some hammers, especially in December and January. But just absolutely appreciate everybody submitting those listener success stories. Again, don't forget our meetup event at Weavers, Hartselle, Alabama, February 24th. It's a Saturday. Make sure you're there. It's going to be an absolutely great time. We had a couple hundred people show up last year during hunting season. It's going to be a lot bigger this year. We're going to have a lot more guests there. Going to do some different speaking, maybe work on some seminars and stuff. It's a free event, family friendly, so come on out. Bring some deer if you want to get scored. And then also remember, Weavers is doing a big buck competition right now for the state of Alabama. So if you're an Alabama listener, you kill a nice buck in Alabama, you can enter to win. They're going to have prizes for the top 10 entries for that. So you might have a pretty good
number
chance.
one's like $1,000.
Yeah, number one's $1,000, guys.
You get a cool G.
A cool G. But yeah, it's gonna be an awesome event. Super excited for that, and I'm excited to have Buckmasters back out there for that event as well, scoring those deer. So just appreciate everybody watching the podcast. Appreciate everybody listening to the podcast, and we're gonna catch you guys back here on Thursday's episode from the Southern Outdoorsman, and you're gonna hear some heartbreak from Jacob Myers. Okay, so don't miss Thursday's episode.
Jacob done goofed.
Yeah. So
golly.
Other than that, guys, y'all have a great week, and remember, y'all stay Southern.